Hello, viewers. Welcome to Canada Bangladesh Social Justice Action Research Alliance. On this platform, we talk about issues that impact social justice locally and globally. Today, with us, we have Dr. Mohammad Khalequzzaman. Dr. Khalequzzaman is a professor of geology at Lock Haven University since 2001. He also served as the chair of the Department of Geology and Physics at Lock Haven University for 3 years from 2005 to 2008. Dr. Khalequzzaman holds a BS and MS degree in mining engineering geology from Azerbaijan Institute of Petroleum and Chemistry in Baku, former USSR. Another MS and PhD in geology from University of Delaware, USA. His areas of expertise and research includes coastal environmental oceanography, water quality, water resource management, and GIS. Dr. Khalequzzaman published numerous papers and newspaper articles on various aspects of transboundary rivers and integrated water resource management in South Asia. Dr. Khalequzzaman authored 3 books on water resources and environment. He collaborated with scientists from India, Canada, and Bangladesh on research projects dealing with equitable and reasonable sharing of transboundary rivers. He co-edited proceedings of 2 international conferences on transboundary rivers and regional cooperation on water resources and Ganga Brahmaputra Meghna basins. Professor Khalequzzaman is the recipient of several national and international awards and research grants. He's involved in community-based watershed alliances and environmental research in both Bangladesh and central Pennsylvania and USA. Dr. Khalequzzaman, thank you very much. You have a very impressive, at the same time intimidating academic track record in your publications. So today we are hoping that we can engage in a conversation so that pretty much anybody can understand our conversation using everyday language. One of the objectives of our conversation to use critical consciousness among general people who don't essentially have extensive academic training, who don't essentially understand scientific jargons and language. With that, Dr. Khalequzzaman, thank you very much for making some time for us.
Thanks for having me. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Usually the first question we ask that today your commitment and contribution for environmental justice, obviously it has taken shape over a long period of time. And we also know that you're from Bangladesh. Please tell us about your personal journey. That how did you come to care about climate justice, and how did you come to this position in your life where you are right now?
Yes, thank you again for having me. Yes, as you mentioned, I was born in Bangladesh and brought up in Bangladesh. I went to school there until 12th grade. After that, I went to the former Soviet Union to do my bachelor's degree and master's. So it was a government scholarship. Following that completion of the scholarship, I went back to Bangladesh, worked for the Bangladesh government geological survey for 3 years. While I was a geologist, obviously you have to go around the country and map the country. So I traveled extensively, especially in the coastal region of Bangladesh. Things that are today, as all of us know, are really becoming more of the victims of the climate change and the climate injustice, however way you want to slice it. Like I visited Norail, Rampal, Mongla, all these coastal belt, also as well as I visited other part of the country. In doing so, I realized how important the coastal setting in Bangladesh is, in the way that it's a very low-lying area, it's very dynamic area. I'm talking about back in the 80s, climate change discussion wasn't that much in the forefront at that point. However, I realized that how coastal areas are, it's the geologically active area, it's a growing area, it's advancing area, it's building area, building land. Bangladesh being a land-starved country, that is really the only place where you can increase the amount of land towards the ocean by deposition of river-borne sediments. So early on in my career, I realized that the role that rivers play in all aspects of life, including the delta building process, including the land formation process. In addition to that, obviously, how the role that water plays in our life. So that is how I got interested in the water resources of Bangladesh. So after that, I decided to shift my emphasis. Uh,
No
I'm
worries, no worries, Dr. Khalik, no worries
I
at
was just
all.
sitting next to my phone, the landphone, and it's yeah. Sorry about that.
No
So
worries.
what I was saying that I was a geologist by training. Basically, originally I was a petroleum geologist, but working in Bangladesh, I realized that I have to probably basic training is still there is geology, but I decided to convert my attention more to the river resources, more to the coastal area, more to the delta building process. Along those lines, I came to the US with a scholarship to study coastal geology at the University of Delaware. So I did my master's and PhD in coastal geology in the 80s, late 80s, 87 through 97. So during that time, the discussion of global warming and the greenhouse effect, climate change, sea level rise, all of those were very fresh. It wasn't really extensively discussed in all sphere of lives, but in the academia it was already in the conversation, already in the discussion. And my advisor, being a very prominent coastal geologist at the time, Dr. Chris Kraft, people who are in coastal geology during that time, they knew him. So I got attracted to that discussion, to the conversation, because immediately I realized that sea level rise will severely impact that low-lying coastal area that I visited and I know. So that is my connection, gradually transforming through my personal experience and then through the exposure of the discourse of the climate change, global warming, and sea level rise at the University of Delaware under the supervision of my advisor, then studying the coastal geology for so many years. So that's how I gradually shifted my focus and interest in the water resources and coastal geology.
Wonderful, wonderful, Dr. Khalequzzaman. One of the things that we ask to our a lot of the scholarly places, and it is well documented that when it comes to understanding the climate crisis in Bangladesh, a lot of the time the crisis is understood from a Western perspective. Now, you and I will both be able to attest to it, is that by living and growing up in a place like Bangladesh, our understanding of the climate crisis from lived experiences is one kind. And dare I say, a lot of the time, when the climate crisis is understood from the global south, things are missed. So today we are trying to focus our conversation is that how we can understand climate crisis from a global southern perspective, from Bangladeshi perspective. So Professor Khalik, my question to you is that how do we begin a conversation that prioritizes the point of view of Bangladesh, point of view of global south, not a point of view of global north?
Yes, it is the most important question that you asked, especially from the global south perspective. Yes, climate change is going to be an existential threat for the entire planet, entire humanity. We know that. We know these are all known factors. But when you discuss it from Bangladesh perspective or from global south perspective, the things really change in the sense that is the human dimension, because Bangladesh being one of the most densely populated countries, and immediately about 70 to 20 million people being directly impacted by the hydro meteorological shock. What I mean by that is most of the climate change is going to affect various aspects of water resources. For example, there will be sea level rise, which we just discussed, and Bangladesh being so flat, and even a little bit of a sea level rise, invade the shoreline by like 20, 30, 40 miles immediately. So there is a misconception. People think that by the end of the century, Bangladesh will be underwater, and it's going to be under ocean. That's not how it's going to happen. Bangladesh is not going to be underwater, under ocean overnight. But what will happen is sea level will rise, and salty water will invade the cropland, invade the freshwater rivers, and our cropland our rivers will be useless. You cannot use really salty water, so it will really creep up inch by inch by inch into the land, into the rivers, and that will make render everything useless. So the point of it is, from Bangladesh perspective, we are immediately talking about 20 million people. It's mind-boggling. Like, for example, the entire Canadian population is only over 33 million people, or 35, whatever might be the latest number. So I'm giving that comparison so that people have that Bangladeshi perspective. We are talking about almost like 2/3 of the Canadian population being impacted immediately, their livelihood, and they have to really shift. They have to really move, because they can't really use that land for crop production, or for water, drinking water, or for sanitation, or for drainage. So it is really a dire situation, and as all of us know, this calamity that's upon us is not our making. It is another perspective. That huge number of people being affected is probably, in terms of number of people being affected immediately, Bangladesh is probably I would say the topmost vulnerable country. So but there are other aspects to climate change, because mitigation is obviously not in our hand. Bangladesh contributes only minuscule amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So mitigation is not going to be an issue. Mitigation is not going to be a factor that Bangladesh should really pay attention to. But adaptation is going to be the prime issue. Now, adaptation, it's not going to be easy to adapt, right? Because only way to defy the sea level rise is by growing the elevation of the land. I hope that everyone is with me from geologic perspective, because our land elevation is reducing, is declining with respect to the ocean for several reasons. One thing is the ocean is rising up, so our land elevation is getting less and less and less. But more importantly, the transboundary river, that's what I said even in the trailer in my social media, that Bangladesh perspective is very complicated, because all of us think about sea level rise and how sea will impact the land. But in our case, in the case of Bangladesh is born by deposition of the river-borne sediment. All the 54 transboundary major rivers not only bring water to Bangladesh, they also carry sediment with them. They have been doing so for millions of years. By deposition of the sediment, delta grows both upward, meaning its elevation rises, also it grows seaward, meaning it advances into the ocean by forming more land. Due to the interference of the transboundary rivers by the upstream neighbors, unfortunately, we are not only getting less and less amount of water, consequently, we are also getting less and less amount of sediments to Bangladesh. So as a result of this, Bangladesh is not growing as much as it used to. This is during the time when we need to grow Bangladesh land at a higher rate rather than at a less rate. So that is that complicated dimension. In other words, yes, climate change is impacting Bangladesh in a very negative way, but those transboundary river issues, the water resources sharing issues, the sediment sharing issues are making it a lot more complicated. So in other words, it's not only the West that is directly responsible for the impact that we are having in Bangladesh on the climate change. Yes, it is obvious we are impacted by the developed countries' greenhouse gas emission. That's global impact. However, locally, we are in a double whammy. In other words, it's a catch-22. We are really pressed between rock and a hard place, as we say it, because it is when we need the fresh water to put the salty water at bay, so to speak. If you have a lot more fresh water in the rivers, salty water cannot invade, the land. When you have less water, salty water encroaches, ingress into the fresh water, like up to Khulna, up to Sylhet, for example. Fresh water get impacted by the salty water. That's the water aspect of it. And the sediment, we are not getting enough sediments. That even makes things more complicated. So country is not growing, and the impact is becoming more visible. Uh, and to make things even more complicated, our upstream neighbors, specifically India, is planning a gigantic project called National River Linking Project. I don't know whether you are aware of it. This is a project by which they will build close to 10,000 kilometer long canals, 29 total canals, diverting water from the major rivers that come to Bangladesh, namely from the Ganges and from the Brahmaputra. So we will be losing in the future, by the mid-century, 24% less water will come to Bangladesh from Ganges, and 6% less water will come from Brahmaputra. As I just mentioned a second ago, water is one issue, but water also carries sediment. As a result of this, not only less water will come into Bangladesh, and during the time when you need them, like during the lean season, like the December through May, those 4 or 5 months, so we will get much less sediment share by these rivers. So it will make things even more complicated. So what is the ultimate outcome? Ultimate outcome is coastal areas, especially places like Satkira, Potuakhali, Borgona, Jashore. Those areas will experience more land loss and more subsidence, more drowning, more water logging. And so people will be forced to abandon their land. They have been living there for generations. So the climate injustice thing that in my mind comes, injustice is not only done to Bangladesh by the north, meaning the Western countries, developed countries, which they are doing, which is, however, it is also being complicated, is being exacerbated by our upstream neighbors. So when it comes to climate justice, in my mind, the environmental refugees, climate refugees that are being generated within Bangladesh, I think that our upstream neighbors, specifically India, should bear a lot of responsibility. So when they complain that some people from Bangladesh are invading in India, I think it's more than justified that they are invading. They are not only invading, India should make room for accommodating those environmental refugees, partly which are being imposed upon us by river diversion and sediment trapping in India.
Thank you, Dr. Khaleq. You have brought a very compelling picture to understand the complexity Bangladesh is facing, by the local, dare I say, the geopolitical, the big shots, how they are impacting our realities, our subjectivities in Bangladesh. Now, I'm going to ask a slightly relevant, challenging, but also extremely relevant question. So we are in a double whammy.
Mm-hmm.
The climate change, we are a very, very small emitter, and we are suffering immense consequence of climate change, which I will say is that, you see, when there's a war happens, we see genocide happening. And because of and I'm not by any means undermining the devastation that happens in a war. I can, just think of, right now, what is happening in Palestine now. Mm-hmm. By no means I am undermining or belittling their suffering. I want us to consider the fact of slow violence, that when you slowly, literally choke a country from water resources, and its survival depend on that water resources critically, you are facilitating a slow death, but an inevitable death. The culture, the economy, the production, the agricultural production of the country is suffering. Now, I want you to focus on this particular thing. In Bangladesh, you and I have one commonality, that you and I are connected to the climate justice movement in Bangladesh. I've been working with Bangladesh, Save the River Bangladesh for some time, and you have been, one of the pioneers in Bangladesh for, climate justice movements. Unfortunately, I mean, I've been an educator for past 20 years, and I have taught from the remote Bangladesh rural villages to, urban areas to where I work right now, Um, unfortunately, among the students, the climate politics or the climate justice issues is not adequately discussed. I mean, I'm from the northern part of Bangladesh, and
Mhm.
the Beel areas, the Haur areas. We lose lands to river erosion every year. You're an educator, you are a professor, and you are from Bangladesh. Tell us, what can we do to create that critical consciousness among Bangladeshi students, like in mass quantity, so that they start raising their voice saying, hey, we haven't done it. Why should we pay the price for it? What can we do?
Absolutely. This is what you are doing. You yourself is doing that role. You are playing that role. You are building the awareness. I am trying to build the awareness. So the very delicate issue that you just brought up a few minutes ago. See, first of all, awareness and education is key to it. Slow violence. Very beautifully you put. See. I think that our upstream neighbors, I don't think they're doing it with that understanding that they want to commit slow violence against us. But they are doing it from nationalistic viewpoint. They are doing it from a very selfish, perspective. They are controlling the river. They are controlling the sediment. They are diverting the rivers. They are putting the dams on the rivers. But I don't think. I love to think that they are not doing it intentionally, like in a war zone. Right? You compared it with a war zone. In a way, it's a war zone, but I would say it's a war zone, but not an intentional war. It's a selfish and nationalistically motivated, act that results in a war-like situation. So if we can communicate with our upstream neighbors, for example, the sediment dynamics, the water dynamics, being connected to the climate injustice, I don't think that is being discussed very, intently in Bangladesh. Because so that is one thing. Like, people. I don't think that very many people relate the climate injustice with the river diversion, with the damming, with the sediment diversion. So that requires an understanding of the natural processes, how the country Bangladesh is formed over geologic time. Its very survival depends on the river and the sediments it carries. So that aspect should be discussed at all level of school in Bangladesh, so that they understand our. If you remember, I don't know, you are young enough, probably you don't remember physically, but you must have read that during the liberation war in Bangladesh, there was a common adage that Tumar Amar ঠিকানা Padda Meghna Jamuna. So, our address is the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna. And that is true in literal sense, because our address, meaning that boundary of Bangladesh, is really created by three and their tributaries, bringing in the water and sediment. So that aspect need to be taught at all level of schools and universities in Bangladesh, so that, as you mentioned, all students have a very solid understanding that, hey, when you not share this water with us, when you don't share these rivers, and those are all international rivers, and all international rivers, all the riparian countries have right to those rivers. So you are violating those rights. So the national river linking project that I mentioned, they are literally reorganizing the flow of all major rivers in India, as if there is no downstream country Bangladesh exists in that entire plan, as if Bangladesh does not exist. They are playing with the water, they are playing with the sediment, they are playing with all this diversion, completely ignoring the interest and the rights of the downstream Bangladesh. So, to an extent, Bangladesh being a downstream country and relatively speaking, not as mighty, as powerful as India is, but I think the truth is on the side of Bangladesh, science is on the side of Bangladesh. Therefore, we think that our northern friends, northern meaning the developed countries, they are in favor of justice. They are in favor of equity. They are in favor of reasonable distribution. They are in favor of understanding the river's right. So we should really educate them as well. So we should get them on our side to at least advocate for us to settle all these transboundary river issues, not only the water issues, also the sediment issues. Because there is a very major seminal work done at the University of Colorado recently by a group of scientists, geoscientists, the river linking in India, downstream impact on water discharge and suspended sediment transport to deltas. So they showed that historically, over the last many centuries, Bangladesh has been growing at a rate of just little over 5 millimeter every year. The elevation is growing by deposition of sediment. Currently, that rate is 2.5 millimeter, meaning half as much. So because of the deprivation of the sediment. And they're saying if the National River Linking Project is implemented by India by the mid-century, that sedimentation rate will be curtailed even further by anywhere from 24% to 30%. So imagine that sea level will be rising at a faster rate. All the reports, IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, they are predicting sea level to rise anywhere from 1 to 2 meter. Even the new report will come up very soon. And most likely that sea level rise scenario will be changed, and it will be predicted that sea level will rise even at a faster rate. So if sea level rises at a faster rate, we need to grow our land at a faster rate. But what is going to happen is just the opposite. And also by mid-century, Himalayan glaciers will be gone. There's other predictions in the IPCC. Once the Himalayan glaciers start to melt, initially we'll get more water, for next few years. But that water will not reach Bangladesh because they are being diverted by the National River Linking Project and Tista and all the things that you are from North Bengal, you mentioned. So after the mid-century, that river flow to Bangladesh will dwindle because the glaciers will be gone. So at that point, Bangladesh will even experience more severe impact of climate change, meaning that more salinity intrusion in the coastal areas and less sediment. So all of this is in a really a vicious cycle. And as I see it, that yes, carbon dioxide and all this need to be controlled, but that is for sure. But in the case of Bangladesh, it's not only the greenhouse gas emission control, it's also the river and sediment, our fair share to the water and sediment will be very essence for the survival of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Khaleq. One other point you have mentioned, Professor, is the science is on our side. The truth is on our side. Now, let me focus on the role of global north. I mean, United States of America, the most militarily powerful country in the world. Let's go back to what was the role of United States of America at different crisis point of Bangladesh. Now, one inevitable question that I might ask, it will be probably on the side of pessimism, but I would rather see the pessimistic reality with humility rather than buying into an optimistic picture, which does not actually exist. So in 1971, when genocide was happening in Bangladesh, during the Kissinger and Nixon administration, they turned a blind eye on the ongoing genocide of Bangladesh. And we know that Professor Gary Bass, his famous work, the Blood Telegram, is that Arthur Blood wrote a telegram rebuking US administration that you are turning a blind eye, a deafening silence towards ongoing genocide, the moral bankruptcy of United States administration. Subsequently, what we're seeing right now, the deafening silence of United States because of the ongoing human right violation in Palestine, that United States is expressing performative allyship, compassion or care, but not in terms of action. question is that when a Bangladeshi young girl, Felani, is shot at the border,
Yes.
why? Because, well, she's a 12-year-old girl, but she has a label that she's Bangladeshi. When Bangladeshis try to escape the climate justice reality, climate injustice, at the border, the BSF will first shoot at them
Mhm.
before asking who they are. When we remember that famous picture when a 2.5-year-old boy was washed at the shores of Turkey when
Turkey,
they were trying to flee.
Aslan.
So, yeah, globally, the superpowers are taking the neoliberal attitude. But you and I, our conversation, I can tell you that right now our conversations are reaching to India. We are trying to collaborate with Indian scholars and Indian activists as well to see that how you are bullying our reality. You are literally marginalizing us. Are you really hopeful that a powerful country like United States will somehow sour the relationship with a local superpower like India to promote the interest of Bangladesh when it comes to water distribution?
It's such a complicated question you asked, but I would like to be optimistic. We have to be optimistic. The reason I'm optimistic, and we have to be, because as I just said, that if we can carry out that conversation at various tracks, like track 2, track 3, people to people, academician to academician, even people to people with, people from Bangladesh to India and Nepal. So I can only see some optimism. For example, what you mentioned about 1971, yes, all of us are familiar with it, but we are also familiar with the flip side of it. The people in the US were in our favor. Ted Kennedy visited us. The people a large mass within US were in favor of Bangladeshi freedom fighters and the concert for Bangladesh. I'm sure you remember Allen Ginsberg. So along those lines, see the research that I mentioned, the University of Colorado, for example. So they are people who are scientists, are very objective. So they brought up at the forefront what a destruction it will be if the national river linking project go on. So you can see we find our allies among the people, among the academician, in the US, even in India. India has a lot of progressive people, a lot of environmentalists, a lot of our friends. Not every single Indians are in favor of choking Bangladesh with water, with sediment. Choking meaning not giving us water and sediments. So there are Indian scientists and activists and environmentalists who are vehemently opposed to that national river linking project. So we have to kind of expand our sphere of influence, expand our collaboration, expand our hydro diplomacy at government level and also at the academician level, at the activist level, and at all level possible. So yes, sometimes the government of the most powerful countries like the US can be very disappointing, but we really have to try our best to expand our sphere of influence with the academician, with the ordinary people, with the environmental organization, and both in the global north and also in our part of the world. So I think I'm hopeful that we have to keep just pushing and we have to keep educating, like even our government. I think that sometimes they have some vested interest and they don't want to open up their mouth. But for example, the Ganges Treaty is another example, because we are academician, you and me, so we don't have any fear of telling the truth. See, the Ganges Treaty was a 30-year treaty. This is one of the 54 rivers that we have a legitimate right on the water share, at least on paper. I'm saying on paper because despite that treaty, we have done some studies. You mentioned in the introductory remarks that I collaborated with scientists from Canada and India. So we have looked into it, that how despite that treaty, how Bangladesh is deprived of her fair share of water despite the treaty. We don't get the water as per the treaty. Actually, 65% of the time, Bangladesh did not receive water as per the treaty agreement. So, but at least when we have treaty, we have a legitimate right on those rivers. So we need to expand those treaties, not for the water sharing, also for sediment, management, also for land use management in the GBM basins. What do you mean by land use management? That as per the compact, nowadays, in the modern world, all the river resources are managed from the viewpoint of basin scale integrated water resources management, meaning it's not just a water sharing. Water is not just a conduit. Water is an ecosystem, and water gets impacted by what you do in land. If you change any land use in the watershed, it impacts the amount of water that's going to come downstream. It's going to impact the water quality. So the future treaties need to be expanded to include these sediment sharing, also the land use changes that occur upstream. They need to inform people in downstream that we are doing that kind of changes within the country. There is a possibility that will have an impact in the downstream region, but we are doing everything possible in our power to minimize that impact. That's how water sharing compacts are really designed these days. For example, Rhine River, you have a Rhine River water sharing compact in Europe, and let's say even between US and Canada, we have the Great Lakes, shared between two countries. So neither Canada nor US can do something that will negatively impact the quality of water in the Great Lakes. See that? So it's not only the amount of water, it's also the quality of water need to be taken care of. And those issues like sediment sharing, the water quality integrations currently are not part of the water sharing treaty that we have with India, the Ganges Treaty. So although the treaty is not working very well, but our government need to bring up that issue to the Indian government. But to the best of our knowledge, Bangladesh government keeps it completely silent. They never open up their mouth because they probably feared that if they complain about it, their weakness will be shown to the country, that you have the treaty, but you cannot implement it properly. So it will be a failure, as if it's a failure on the part of the government. But I personally don't see it as a failure of our government because we are downstream country. I think our government or the Joint River Commission should bring up those issues, those discrepancies in the treaties, at every possible chance that they will get with the Indian counterpart. That, hey, we have the treaty, but we are not getting our fair share. Instead of keeping it quiet, they should bring up those issues. If you don't complain, if you don't bring up those injustice to the Indian authority, they will continue doing it without doing anything about it. And if we keep bringing up those issues at all level with Indian authorities, and if they still don't listen to our complaints, then Bangladesh should really bring it to the international fora, such as the UN or the International Court of Justice. And if you bring up those issues to the international forum, I don't necessarily think that it is going against India, because between friends you can have a dispute. That's why those international courts are for, to do the arbitration. For example, the maritime boundaries between India and Bangladesh, between Bangladesh and Myanmar, were settled in international courts. So there is nothing wrong about that. So what I mean that Bangladesh should first try at a bilateral level, but those water issues are not bilateral because the rivers are shared between Bangladesh, India, Nepal, China, Bhutan. So in my mind, we need to have a broader compact. We need to have a broader alliance. We need to have a broader GBM basins, modeled after Rhine basins, modeled after Danube River basin, modeled after US-Canadian, water sharing and water management.
Excellent, and you have brought in a lot of critical point to understand the water resource distribution critically. And I loved the way you put it, is that in 1971, maybe the US administration did not support the independence of Bangladesh, but the people of United States, George Harrison, Allen Ginsberg, Arthur Blood, they have done so. We
Ted
have
Kennedy,
to recognize,
Ted Kennedy,
Ted Kennedy, at the same time. Now, let us try to understand. When you mentioned incredibly powerful point is that international organizations like United Nations, a report published in 2019 by UNESCO that shows that more than 19 million children, I repeat, children, are living under difficult situation. It endangers their life directly because of the climate change, river erosions, flooding, and so on and so forth. And the report also paints a grim reality is that because of climate change, because of river erosion, this sort of problem, Bangladesh at the moment is the second biggest country in terms of internally dislocated people,
Yes.
internal displacement
Mhm.
people, after India. Now, the point is, in that report, it says that young girls in Bangladesh are being sold to prostitution, and it has a direct connection to climate change, climate injustice. Now, when you come to organizations like United Nations, incredibly, they have power. They have power, and that's obviously to say. Now, let's say when we see, and I'm very proud of Greta Thunberg, is that she can go to United Nations and her voice is heard. All the head of the states are listening to Greta Thunberg when she's holding them accountable. Now, when a climate activist from Ghana is going to America and also expressing her concern, in the American press, her picture was cut. And then when she tweeted it, that I'm from a country that is disproportionately impacted by your action, and you are silencing me. Then American press apologized, and their justification for cutting her picture was, oh, it was because of composition. So in four young women who are climate activists, only one young woman's photo was cut. That was the black woman from Ghana, right? Now the question is the United Nation or the world prepared to hear the young girls of Bangladesh are the way they're hearing to Greta Thunberg? I appreciate Greta Thunberg's contribution in bringing awareness, but it's like almost going to Gayatri Chakraborty's Piva. Can the subaltern speak? We can speak. Are you willing to listen to us? You are in an incredibly powerful position. Sorry, when I say powerful in these academic spaces, that you are a scientist, you're a professor, you are doing an incredible amount of work creating awareness among American academic communities and around the world. Now you and I have a core responsibilities to bring this awareness and contest it, challenge it. What would you say to the Western audience, to the people of the Western countries, that so that they start developing a critical consciousness that the girls of Bangladesh can also talk? Are they willing to hear?
Yes, yes, absolutely. They are willing to talk, and are they willing to hear? Uh, well, we have to hold them up to their own words, because West think that they are very progressive, they are very open-minded, they are very much for climate justice. So let's test it out. So as you shouted out, as you pointed it out, how they cut off this girl from Ghana. So we have to do that. We have to keep doing that. We have to keep pointing it out to them, whenever they do this kind of injustice. So yes, Bangladesh definitely, but we need to also prepare ourselves. We need to have a representative. I do know that there are a lot of Bangladeshi younger girls who are involved in, climate action. Around the world, we work with them. So I think that they need to also prepare themselves, by educating, by being very versed in the language, so that they can be they can be very vocal. They can be come across with their points very clearly in a very Western language that they understand. So it is not there yet, but I think we have to keep trying. We have to keep trying. Like organization like yours doing a wonderful job. You are sitting in the West and talking about the social justice, talking about the climate justice, and more you can involve the Western activism, activist, Western researcher, Western scientist, better it is. So let's keep hoping that we will be able to make a difference. It's not going to be easy. We can see for sure, but we have to keep trying, and you are doing just that.
Thank you, Professor. One of the other questions that often gets asked, that when it comes to climate adaptation, climate change adaptation, that we have been asked, a country like Bangladesh, who is paying for a crime we did not commit.
Yes.
Be it our neighboring countries who are geopolitically way more powerful than we are, or European countries or global north. Noam Chomsky, in a presentation in New York, said, quoted Professor Atiq Rahman, is that when in a New York Times article, he said that Bangladesh has not committed this crime, so Bangladeshis should be able to move to United States because we are suffering something that we did not commit. What would you say about the point of reparation? I'm focusing on the point of reparation. That is the West, countries that have destroyed the climate for their economic progress, are they doing enough? What are they missing? What else they can do to pay the reparation for the climate injustice Bangladesh is suffering?
Well, of course, they are not doing enough. As you said, the short answer to your question, they are not doing enough, because what they have even promised, for example, $100 billion per year, that is not there. They are not really meeting their responsibility. The Western countries, they are not paying that $100 billion per year. Also, in the COP26, for example, I hope that they will adopt that loss and damage. So that's not adopted, meaning that all the damage that is done by the climate change, they need to pay for it. They need to pay for the loss. So it is when Bangladesh and other countries, most vulnerable countries, ask for reparation, it's not they are asking for any favor. They are not really asking for favor. They are really just asking their fair share. The $100 billion is number one. Another, what you just mentioned, in line with the Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky, by the way, is also supported the atrocity that is Israelis are doing to the Palestinian kids. That's very similar. So in the sense that I think that environmental refugee issues.
Professor, you mean that Noam Chomsky has vehemently protested the oppression against the Palestinian
what Israel
children?
is doing to the Palestinians. That's what I mean. Meaning they are supporting the Palestinian, action that Palestinians are protesting.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'm saying that right now we have a slightly favorable political atmosphere in the U.S. specifically, because Joe Biden appointed Kerry as the climate change envoy. So maybe they are open to new dialogue, new discussion. So at the COP26 at Glasgow, I think that our honorable Prime Minister from Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, is now the chair of the most vulnerable countries forum. So I hope that they will bring up those issues that we brought here today, like those reparation issues, like the climate refugees issues, that how Bangladeshi climate refugees in the not only in the coastal south, also in the river banks of the Jamuna, for example, as you are from the northern part of Bangladesh, and the river bank erosion displaces thousands of people every year, and most of them end up in slums in Dhaka. And if you do the study, you know that about half of the slum dwellers in Dhaka, millions of them, they are really climate refugees. Either they lost their home to the river bank erosion, and by the way, river bank erosion is also associated with that with the water injustice that the upper riparian countries that they are doing to us. That flashiness of the water flow. They release the water when they don't want it. They stop the water when they need it. So that flashiness, or disturbance in the natural hydrologic system is also somewhat responsible for those river bank erosion, that need to be investigated. So not only the coastal south, where people are being displaced due to the sea level rise and salinity ingress and water logging, like in Babadaha Jashore, for example. And Bangladesh also is not taking care of her rivers very well. One injustice is being done by our neighbors. Within Bangladesh, we don't take care of our rivers. We are polluting them. People are grabbing them. So that is another injustice we are doing to our own people. So it has another dimension as well. So the point of it is, I think that Bangladesh should bring up those climate refugees issues, reparation issues, resettlement issues, some of those climate refugees in the Western world at COP26 and beyond.
Wonderful. In terms of COP26, I have a concern, and you have rightly pointed out that Bangladesh has a better seat at COP26.
Right
At
now.
the same time, right now. At the same time, let's think about what has happened when the world tried to hold the corporates responsible for their crime. Now, one of the things that you and I know very well, that even in United States of America, the largest economy in the world, there a huge percentage of the people, they don't believe that climate change is a thing. Now, it's a very old strategy that was adopted by tobacco companies first. Is that there's a wonderful book, it's called The Merchant of Doubts. So basically, what the companies did for the tobacco companies for selling their tobacco is there a direct correlation between health issues and tobacco? So the tobacco companies actually created, produced, and propagated doubts about tobacco's negative impacts on health. Now, similarly, when it comes to climate change, the organized corporations, powered with their digital resources and on a global network of internet, it's possible, and they have been doing it. They have been actually circulating, producing different kinds of false disinformation, misinformation about climate change. Because if the people start getting to know that, oh, these corporations are responsible, then they will start holding the companies accountable. So the corporations have an active interest in spreading wrong information, disinformation, misinformation about the climate change. Do you think that academics like you, academics, who are people like me who are in academic circles, are we doing enough to combat this digital space disinformation, misinformation? All I have to tell you is that just think what has happened in January 6th in the United States of America. The former pathological liar, United States of America, he just said, oh, the election was rigged. And almost 500,000 people went to the most powerful space in America to take the country back. Now, do you think that we're doing enough to fight disinformation? And are we doing a good job to actually reach out to the people?
I think that academicians are doing their role, but I don't know whether it's enough or not. There is room to do more, but you are absolutely right that this battle is uphill. Our battle is uphill, for example, to debunk those lies, to this merchant of doubts kind of a thing that you mentioned. Yes, absolutely. It's the climate change in the US. You are right. That's why I say that right now we have a little bit of a favorable atmosphere because Jim Carrey was appointed by Joe Biden. So our current administration, at least, is not really hiding their face in the sand. At least they are willing to take responsibility. At least they are willing to jump into the leadership role. And as I said before, so the countries like Bangladesh, they need to take advantage of their own promise. We need to hold them responsible to their own words, that you are really admitting that climate change is a major issue and it is need to be dealt with. So part of dealing with it is also the issues of reparation, issues of climate refugees. So what are you going to do about that? So we need to really, confront them face to face, not in a defiant way, but bringing up all these issues, to the table. And as you are saying that whether we are doing it enough, there is always room for doing more, and we should continue doing more. But in my mind, academicians are just one aspect of the equation. They don't call the shots. They are not the decision maker. We can only bring up the facts to the table, and the ultimate decision is up to the political leaders. So we have to really work with them, to educate them, to work with them.
Absolutely, Professor. No worries, you can take that.
No, I'm not going to take the call, but I'm saying that this is
Yeah.
mainly the telemarketers, as you know, it's
Yeah.
the landphone.
Yeah. One of the last questions that I have for you for our discussion today is, that Bangladesh High Court has done an outstanding job by ruling into 2019, I believe, is that all the educational institutions will have to teach about climate change, about rivers, about
Yes.
what's happening in Bangladesh. I would say that growing up in the midst of all this climate crisis, like you and I know it very well, that every day nearly 50 children in Bangladesh drown and die because of flood and water issues and etc. And John Kerry is doing a wonderful job in reaching out to the world in many ways. Question to you, Professor, is that you as an educator, like when the scientists or academic people in academic spaces, when we speak in academic language.
Mm-hmm.
We use a lot of jargons which is not accessible to everybody. But if you look at this merchant of doubts, people who are working to create doubt in people's mind, they do wonderfully. I mean, I think we have something incredibly important to learn from Donald Trump. He used pretty dumb language. He used very plain, straightforward, almost like childish language. But he was incredibly effective in reaching greater audience to, I know science is not simple. I know that, but as a teacher myself, I think that we could do a better job to reach out to wider audience. My last question to you, Professor, is that what can we do in Bangladeshi context so that the marginalized students of Bangladesh, the children, the students from villages who don't speak English, who don't go to privileged school systems, who don't have the financial affordability probably to go and afford an education, like you have been educated abroad, you have done your master's and PhD in USA, I am doing a PhD in Canada. By no means I'm putting myself on pedestal. What is it that we can do so that these young students from the villages of Bangladesh, from the margins of Bangladesh, can be brought in the center and make them part of this movement where they can raise their voice like Greta Thunberg?
What an excellent question. What an excellent question. The reason I am sighing because it's a monumental task, because Bangladesh is victim from all perspective. So I think that such a gigantic scale work should be done with the help of our government, because they have a lot of resources, and they can influence a greater amount of people within a very short period of time by incorporating some of those ideas that High Court really directed into the textbooks, right? So government should do that. In addition to that, academicians, environmental activists, cultural activists, they also need to be involved in this. And it's not going to be easy, because we have to educate ourselves first, meaning train the trainer kind of a thing. So we have to really create a lot of train the trainer, and then we really need to get involved with those a lot of NGOs in Bangladesh. But NGOs, I have a little bit of an apprehension, because most of the time NGOs have their own agenda. They are not necessarily always to do what is best for the country, because this is, at the end of the day, NGOs are business, really. So they look for their own interest. So what I'm saying that educating our marginalized people is very important, because they are the most vulnerable. They are the most victim of those injustice. Either it's a climate injustice, or it's the water injustice, or it's the environmental injustice. So we need to get them involved, but in a plain language, as you said. Simultaneously, language shouldn't be language should be plain, but it should be fact based. You gave an example a few seconds ago about the Donald Trump. He was simplifying it with lies. So we shouldn't really simplify with, like, unfounded claims. So we should really make the language very simple and reachable, but it has to be based on science. It has to be based on facts. We should really work towards that goal. But I think that if we can convince our government, because our government, Bangladesh being the most vulnerable country, most downstream country, they really should adapt to those ideas that we are discussing. That and even our High Court is such a progressive organization. It turned out to be. It gave the verdict, as you know, as the reverse, as the personhood, as the legal entity. It is one of the most progressive verdicts in the world. And they also directed to teach the schools and universities, at the offices, all the issues about the rivers, about water, about climate change. So government should take advantage of this, and they should incorporate some of these agenda into the textbooks at all level, and train the trainer. And as we just discussed, that government should also bring up those issues at all fora, international fora, with dealing with our neighbors, to the UN, to the COP26. At what level? At all level, social justice, environmental justice, and then climate justice issues need to be at forefront of our government agenda when they are dealing with international partners and international agencies and international players.
Thank you, Professor. I want to end with a call to action to you and all to many professors, educators. So, as I always say in the beginning of our conversation, that Social Justice Action Research Alliance, and anybody who is in research, we know the language action research, that how research can actually change action, not
Yes.
only staying in academia in the ivory tower. So one of the things that we have started doing, so from the very beginning, what we do we use these conversations to do two things. A, promote critical consciousness, critical thinking. And I am sure, Professor, that you are just as well aware as I am that in Bangladesh, like many places in the world, we have failed miserably in our education system to promote critical thinking, independent thinking among our students. So we use these conversations to promote critical thinking among students. The other initiative, what we do, which we, for their own convenience and also the progress, we have not started, circulating it widely. We engage with the students from the remote Bangladesh, somebody from a small village with a smartphone, not very, you and I are talking wonderfully, no problem, because internet speed is fast here. We don't have electricity failure here. So they participate in our conversation. They speak in their language. I would request you, Professor, to join in those conversations, listen to those young students, their aspirations, and let's go into a dialogue. What Paulo Freire talked about, conscientization, not essentially the banking model of education. So I urge you, request you that please, in our future conversation, I'll reach out to you so that we can, get into conversation with the marginalized educators and students. Yes, we hope that the authority or world government bodies, United Nations, powerful countries, government, they do their due diligence to educate. At the same time, wanting to do what we can to promote critical literacy. So we invite you, Professor, to participate in our conversation.
Absolutely, count me in. I'm all for it, and I would very much love to converse with our marginalized students. Since
Mhm.
you are working in that field, I know you are very involved in that field. Please count me in. Please, involve in those dialogue, in those educational activities. So I'll be more than happy to be a part of your future programs.
Thank you, Professor. This is our collective effort. And, usually one of the other things that, we do in those conversations, like I give this figure all the time, is that I'm in Canada and I'm an immigrant here. So my son will not have to pay international tuition fees. But the international tuition fees in university like Canada for the international students is 61,000 Canadian dollar
The same
for one
thing here in
student.
the US,
Yeah,
very similar.
yeah. So if professors like you or small educators like me, if we talk to these young kids in the villages of Bangladesh and we can give them the guidelines, aspirations. I studied here on scholarship. My father is a farmer. He couldn't afford to pay tuition fees here.
Yes, of course.
So
I'm also from a very similar family that you are,
yeah, you have mentioned that I have 11 siblings, you have 9 siblings. So.
Yes, absolutely. So we are on the same boat. We know exactly how it is, of course.
Yeah. And imagine the kind of changes you can bring when you converse with a daughter of a fisherman from a village, when you guide her to tell her, hey, these are the ways you can do. I'm here, to help you in any way possible. We can really make significant changes. I often say this, is that no child is born with the deficiency in merit. It's the structure that marginalizes them. So with that positive...
I'll feel honored to be a part of your initiative if you can involve me in those activities.
I certainly will, Professor. With that optimist note, thank you, Professor, for giving us some time from your busy schedule. We will bother you again and again to...
No, it's not a bother at all. It's not a bother at all. It was a pleasure. And as you know me, it's not... Yes, we are seeing face-to-face each other, but both of us are familiar with each other's works. So we are committed to make our world a better place for our children. So we'll do our part.
Hopefully, absolutely. With that, have a wonderful day, Professor Khalequzzaman, and all our audiences who have been with us and send us questions. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.